This week, we welcome Derek Manky, Chief Security Insights and Global Threat Alliances at Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs, to discuss actionable high-resolution threat intelligence. In the leadership and communication section, cybersecurity is IT's job, not the board's, right? Why some CISOs fail, how JetBlue creates a culture of security, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Endpoint security is designed to protect every device in your fleet, wherever it may be. These days, that can be a lot of different places. Find out how HP Wolf Security uses emerging strategies like application isolation, along with a zero-trust approach and framework to give you a powerful, manageable, usable solution to your growing and increasingly spread-out security challenges. Learn how HP Wolf Security can make a difference across your endpoints at securityweekly.com/HP Wolf. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersync. Account takeovers, malicious campaigns, impersonation, and data breaches are on the rise, driven by the pandemic and security challenges of a remote workforce. The number one most common attack vector in breaches is compromised credentials. Constella Intelligence protects your key employees from digital risk by continuously monitoring the deep, dark, and surface web for exposed credentials, detecting threats that others miss with real-time alerts to protect you and your company from a targeted attack. Try it free at securityweekly.com/Constella.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 258, recorded April 11th, 2022. I am your host, Matt Alderman, from my new location in Texas. Yes, I know, I need a little more decoration. I'll get to it, I promise. Joining remotely are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, Matt. So glad you had a great move. It went well. You're settled now in Texas, and hopefully you'll have that gray and blue quarter zip that you'll be able to don now that you're a Texas resident.
Yeah, it's going to be 93 today, so no quarter zips today. But thank you also for running the ship last week. I heard you did a great job.
Oh, all good. Hey, nothing compared to you, my friend, but I did the deed.
Also joining from about 3 hours down the road, Mr. Ben Carr.
Hey, Matt, welcome to Texas. Enjoy a Texas summer, which means you're sweating already here in that 90-plus degree weather. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite there yet, but it's coming. I know it. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. Also, join us April 14th to learn how to monitor your Wi-Fi networks for attacks with Enzyme, a free and open source wireless intrusion detection system with Lennart Koopman, hosted by Larry Pesce and Paul Asadorian. Then join Alan Stasilauskas and host Tyler Robinson and Paul Asadorian on April 21st to learn how to gain visibility into your system, into your enterprise with Sysmon. Live attendees at both webcasts will have the chance to win a $100 Hacker Warehouse gift card. Register at securityweekly.com/webcasts. And don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings by visiting securityweekly.com/on-demand. This segment is sponsored by Fortinet. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Fortinet. Derek Manky formulates security strategy with more than 20 years of cybersecurity experience behind him. His ultimate goal to make a positive impact in the global war on cybercrime. Derek provides thought leadership to industry and has presented research and strategy worldwide at Premier Security Conference. As a cybersecurity expert, his work includes meetings with leading political figures and key policy stakeholders, including law enforcement. He is actively involved with several global threat intelligence initiatives, all in an effort to shape the future of actionable threat intelligence and proactive security strategy. Derek, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thanks for having me here again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So we're going to talk threat intelligence. We're going to talk actionable high-resolution threat intelligence. But before we go there, so I was telling the story a little bit before we got on the air today. I remember about 10 years ago, threat intelligence was like the hottest thing. RSA conference, everybody's walking around with Viking hats on, looking at this beautiful threat map from Norse Security. And then threat intelligence kind of went to the wayside for a while. Like it kind of went out of style. And I think part of it potentially was we had so many threat intelligence feeds, so much data, like nobody knew what to do with it. Nobody knew how to manage it. Nobody knew how to correlate it. It was a lot of repetitive data. So I guess where I want to start, Derek, is that where we still are today, or have we actually made improvements around threat intelligence?
So a good question. The same challenges definitely exist, but we have made improvements. So that's the good news. But we're going to continue to be faced with these challenges. And that's just a result of a growing attack surface, right? The larger the attack surface gets, the more sessions that you have running, the more logs are generated, the more, the cyber criminal ecosystem, unfortunately, has grown. They've made profits like mad. We all know this and talk about that a lot. That's the whole cyber crime aspect. So volume has increased, complexity has increased, and we're getting much more data because of that. So the challenge is, yes, we are still overloaded with data and information, but I think it's important to break this down by what that is, right? And just state the facts. I mean, first of all, you mentioned threat intel feeds as an example. That's very old school. It's a necessity in some cases, but they're not contextualized, right? You get a lot of IOCs, a lot of information on things that change hourly almost nowadays. IP addresses, domain names, and malware hashes as an example, right? That was very in 10 years ago. Nowadays, it's not just knowing about the what's, the IOCs, but you want to know about why. Where is this coming from? Much more, the intelligence part of it is much more focused around tagging, right? So contextual information, groups themselves, different capabilities, TTPs, techniques, tactics, procedures. So that's been a game changer compared to 10 years ago, because that simply didn't exist. Even the languages, like Styx as an example, was just being created 10 years ago that described those sorts of things. So that's changed a lot. But really, when I look at this, there's information, there's knowledge, and then there's intelligence and actionable intelligence, right? It's one thing to say, I know there's a whole bunch of bad stuff out there, but true intelligence is saying, okay, I know this is bad because it's doing this, and we've seen it do this before, as an example, these groups, right? That's true intelligence. So it's much more about the contextualization, and that's where we sit today.
So we have always known that the holy grail is like the TTPs, right? I want to know which techniques, tactics, and processes and procedures they're using. And like 10 years ago, that was kind of hard to figure out. Like we were back just doing the basic stuff. Are we better now at understanding TTPs and then leveraging those TTPs to actually make actionable intelligence off of? Because that's what when I was at Tenable, we were talking about this, right? It wasn't about threat intelligence, it was about actionable threat intelligence. But what was that data you needed to make it actionable? Is TTPs, are we there now where we actually can understand those components and use that to make really intelligent decisions?
Another good question. Yeah, so this is a maturity cycle. If we look, so just talking about the IOCs again quickly, that is the big, large pool. There's a lot of course, anytime you make intelligence actionable, you need to have trust in that, right? So it has to be vetted. We, as a security vendor, as an example with Fortinet, we need to make sure we're doing this as accurately as possible. And that's the trust, right? When you hand that off to actionable threat intelligence and we put it into security policies and controls controls, and that's all automatically updated in feeds. That's been done now on IOCs, right? Because there's a very mature QA process to do all of that, right? Verify, is this IP address still malicious or is it not? Is this domain still being used for botnet command and control? Like that's a lot of that has been accomplished over the last 10 years. But when we talk TTPs, there's still a lot of work to be done. Yes, we have made strides and we have made progress towards that. Machine learning models have been another big invention. I wouldn't say invention because it's been around for a long time, I guess, but it's been implemented now, right, for cybersecurity, especially on the threat intelligence model for the last 10 years, which is helping now to separate that signal from the noise to get more accurate information with TTPs. But it's still a work in progress. We've done a good job in the industry of mapping TTPs statically. So if you look at MITRE and APT mappings, right, to known nation state groups, as an example, it's a laundry list, right, saying we know that this group is capable of X amount, usually a big list of different TTPs. They're capable of this because we've observed it through the last 3 or 4 years. So that's been done, and that's a necessary static map. But what's happening now, and this is the really exciting part that we're actually actively working on with FortiGuard Labs as well too, is making that dynamic, right? Looking at not just APT groups, but cybercrime groups, and not just 5 years of history, but what have they done this month in this vertical, as an example? And what are the actual TTPs that are lighting up? What are they actually using out there in these various campaigns, right? That it's a necessity. It's actually a leap that we need to make in the industry, because once we know that and we have that real time, because that's the new feed. It's not a feed, but just comparing what you talked about with threat feeds before, that really is what the new threat feeds are becoming, is a knowledge base, a library, if you will, of all this up-to-date TTPs, right? Once you have that, then you can truly start to make that actionable, right? Because there's obviously security solutions, strategies, mitigations that stack up against that. But this is the playbook discussion, right? It's going from IOC feeds to playbooks. Once you know what they're actually using with TTPs and you have that mapped out, that's their offense, right? That's their playbook. Then you can build a good defense against that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Derek. I mean, we've kind of seen a shift in the way typical threats are coming in, right? I mean, there's been, 10, 15 years worth of high profit activity going out there. And now there are criminal syndicates that are attacking us. I mean, I've seen with a lot of our customers that there's a ton of recon happening against them before they even get attacked or breached. We're moving from that, spray and pray type mentality to that low and slow recon. And really attacking over time. It's extremely important to have that level of intelligence coming in to combat those criminal syndicates. And for me, and Matt will know, he'll attest, he's heard this a million times, it's about the ecosystem to be able to remediate after. One of the things I love about Fortinet is the security fabric that you bring to the table. Complete open here. I've been a Fortinet partner for well over a decade between multiple organizations that I've worked at. And I always like the ecosystem approach that Fortinet brings to the table, because you're gathering intelligence not just from the firewall, not just from your next-gen firewall. You're getting endpoint intelligence now. You're getting SD-WAN intelligence now, right? So you're gathering all this intelligence from multiple pieces of your ecosystem, and then being able to remediate, automate, or orchestrate your defense, right, with that intelligence, because it's part of a holistic ecosystem that intelligence and context can bring into the solution.
Yeah, that's right, and it's important for various reasons, right? One, like you just said, in that ecosystem, it stacks up nicely against the attack chain, right? So old school kill chain, yes, but also the attack chain, when we talk about everything you talked about, from reconnaissance moving forward to execution, evasive maneuvers you're trying to do to get around security controls. That's really important to us, of course, when we map that and know and can detect those things. So that's one aspect. The other good thing is, because we see those things, we can actually mitigate it and disrupt it. And again, going back to that playbook analogy, is if you can hit them, this is the classic pyramid of pain that has been talked about for a long time, right? If again, if you're just blocking on feeds and ILCs, it's really cheap and easy for cyber criminal syndicates to just register a whole, to have a DGA, a domain generation algorithm that's, doing 10,000 domains a day, right? Versus, hey, if we know how they're doing reconnaissance or how they're doing these different, defensive agent techniques, and we can actually map that and make sure we have that covered, it's a lot more expensive for them to actually go back and try to change that technique. So that's the other name of the game here, is disruption with that too, right?
Yeah. So just a little bit about what you're seeing, because from my perspective, I'm looking at it like attacks are expanding well out, simply because the edge has become more, I'll call it empowered, right? The edge is more empowered these days. So there's increased risk at the edge, higher privilege, yep. APIs. We're seeing low code, no code applications that endpoints are using. What are you seeing? A lot of those trends at the edge where, there's higher risk and there needs to be more focus there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's the low-hanging fruit that we talk about that cyber criminals are going after a lot of the times. I mean, it started with IoT, of course, years ago, and still a big problem today. But now, as you said, to empowered edge devices, right? Even in OT. OT is a big space now too. But you have these devices, as you said, APIs, a lot of inherently trusted devices that are placed onto networks, which should not be trusted by nature. That gets us into the whole zero trust and ZTNA conversation. But yeah, absolutely. These are natural targets for attackers to go after because they are empowered, right? Because they can use as a land and expand. We're also seeing living off the land attacks now happening, meaning that once they get onto a compromised device, they can actually work within that space because these devices are empowered, because they have API connection, they have authentication. They can use those within their own boundaries to try to evade detection, right? Because they're saying, hey, don't mind me. I'm this device just performing a normal normal action, but they're taking that opportunity to do malicious action. And that stacks up with their game plan, all this that we're talking about for these low and slow targeted attacks, right? And that's precisely how they're doing that. And they are targeting a lot of these devices now at the edge to accomplish that.
So you talk about this concept of high resolution threat intelligence. And my assumption, to tie it into Jason's theme a little bit, is you have to have a broader ecosystem to create that high resolution, right? It's not just about the firewall and the perimeter. It's the endpoint. It's east-west traffic instead of just north-south traffic. Is that what you mean by high resolution, is you need multiple sources to correlate against, to say, yes, we know that this is a potential attack because we can see it from multiple vantage points?
Yes, multiple vantage points and contextualized, so deeper also, looking further into the OSI stack, right? When you get to application related, like not just network data as an example, but things like regex entries that could be triggering or tagged to these campaigns as an example, right? And then you also have, of course, frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK, right? That's a good example. So we actually speak TTPs, our product, like FortiSandbox, EDR. We actually map TTPs, we observe them, we log them, we report them. So we get that intelligence coming back. And then we can turn that into, that is the high resolution, because you're essentially zooming in, right? Not just looking at an IP address again, but everything that we can observe from an attacker's point of view that's related to that, including techniques that they're doing at an endpoint, right? To try to get around security controls, sandbox detection, routines, for evasion that they're using, those sorts of things. And then, of course, when we take that on the flip side, once we actually speak that and we can map these and observe these things, we can actually detect those and mitigate them during campaigns. A good example of that, again, if we look at MITRE and ATT&CK, we actually test very well with MITRE ATT&CK evaluations, right? Because they're actually running these simulated campaigns to see, are you detecting all these various TTPs? But of course, you need that in the ecosystem. You need the detection engines. You need to be able to speak that language, and not just, again, at the network layer, but actually adopting frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK.
Right. I was going to let Ben get in here if he's got a question, but I want to, Ben, if you do, just jump in. But what does this mean for information sharing going forward? Right. We've seen a lot in the press around the need for public-private partnerships and information sharings, and we know we've got some good programs out there, but other programs are behind. Do we have to start thinking about sharing TTPs, not just the IOCs anymore? Does that change the way some of these information sharing programs have to evolve in the future to be more actionable as we share this data across the industry?
So Matt, you must have read my mind on that one. That was actually what I was going to ask was, as we look at this and you think about the sharing of IOCs, doesn't this necessitate that level of cooperation in a more robust way to share this data across enterprises to really get at the heart of, what we're trying to assess long term?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the good news is it's starting to happen, but there's a lot more work to be done. But absolutely. I mean, it's a game changer, right? Again, it's not like we said at the start of this conversation, 10 years ago, it was very in to have the IOCs and the threat feeds. And that was the big thing tied to threat intelligence. Now, the big thing tied to threat intelligence is real-time sharing of TTPs. Absolutely. And I'll talk about why that's really important in a second. But again, that needs to happen more, right? And so there needs to be a wider adoption. Yeah.
What do you think
exactly.
The framework's going to look like for that? Like how are we going to share that data so it's, I don't know, ubiquitous and we can access that and look at it without looking at a vendor-specific response?
Yeah, good question. So the more that we can standardize this, the better in the industry. Of course, there is never a gold standard. You have things like Stix and Taxi, of course, that's widely adopted now, but not everyone's using it to speak TTPs as an example, right? Then you have other platforms like MISP, which can do it again, but again, it depends if you're actually using the latest MITRE ATT&CK framework as an example. So MITRE ATT&CK is good for TTPs. It's up to V10 right now. There's 10 different versions. So staying on top of the latest version is very important with that. Being able to share that via other platforms. It doesn't matter if you're using MISP or Stix and Taxi, right? But just being able to use the latest framework and to share that and have, of course, the right audience that can actually ingest that. That's important. Cyber Threat Alliance is a good example of that, right? So we're a co-founder of that. The CTA has a platform called Magellan, which is Stix version 2. And we actually do have TTPs. We map things to kill chain in there, to TTPs as an example too. And there's over 30 members, 33 and counting in the CTA that are actually plugged into that and speaking TTPs. That's a good start, but and it's great, don't get me wrong. But again, it needs to grow more in the industry to the point where it becomes literally the new IOC feed, because IOC feeds, they're everywhere. They're ubiquitous now, as we know. And it needs to be the same with the TTPs. Yeah.
Yeah. So the threat intelligence platforms become TTP platforms or actionable threat intelligence platforms, right? Because I mean, that's what a lot of them did. They were just aggregating IOCs. But if it is really about the MITRE ATT&CK and the kill chain and the TTPs, that evolves the whole threat intelligence platform landscape for the future. I'm just curious also how open organizations are to actually getting to the concept of information sharing to the point where we can help each other out. I know the federal government would love us to do more. I'm just not sure all the commercials are there yet.
Yeah, it also changes things operationally. Like if you put your hat on as a SOC analyst, right? It goes from the conversation of, hey, I have 10 different IOC feeds, and I'm getting a whole bunch of logs coming in, and I see that there's a bad IP address or a domain that's been flagged as malicious. So what? Right? That's a lot of work. Then they got to go down the rabbit hole and look at what is it? What do we know about this domain? Why was it blocked? Where was this coming from? What application was actually triggering this? Is it related to malware or a botnet? It's a big chain, right? Whereas when we're talking about TTPs, that's already all done, right? And again, the threat intelligence platforms have to adopt that. They have to have those tools available for the SOC analyst, but it eliminates all of that work so they can get right to the juicy details and know everything about that attack, and then it literally have a defensive playbook, right? Saying, okay, I know that it's this campaign. They're probably after credentials. Do I have, how do I respond to this on the defensive side versus doing all of that sort of upfront work, right? And that's again, when we understand the TTPs, there's always a defensive side to the TTPs that we can build on top of that. I like to use the game of chess as an analogy here too, right? Because there's also a predictive modeling aspect. That's the future, by the way. We're getting there also, where you can apply machine learning to these TTPs, knowing that this certain cybercrime syndicate always follows this chain of TTPs, right? They're always using similar techniques, so we know that because they're targeting us, they're likely to use the same things, right? So we can prepare for those things more. That's really interesting stuff, right? And it's like the game of chess, right? If you know your opponent is going to make 5,000 potential moves in the world of IOCs, that's overwhelming. But if you know based off of real data that they're really only using 10 different techniques in their playbook, you have a much better chance of defense against that, right?
Right. Which means we need to build the advanced security operations center, because when we built the ASOC 10 years ago, it was based off of what you just described, right? Here's an indicator, fires an alert. I have to go figure out the data. But now if I use the TTPs and I have all that at my fingertips, that evolves the SOC to another level that we didn't start thinking about 10 years ago as we were out building the advanced SOC. So now we build the AA SOC.
Exactly. Yeah. It's level up, as we say, right? But yeah, definitely. And the good news is that is starting to happen. As I said, right there, we are speaking the TTPs more. We've even built tools at FortiGuard Labs as an example, because we've started to showcase this data in our threat landscape report now to show actual relevant, up-to-date TTPs that we're seeing for these campaigns, which is great. We're also working with MITRE Ingenuity, the Center for Threat Informed Defense. Project was published in Q1 this year called the Sightings Ecosystem. And this is a framework, an ecosystem that can be built in the industry, right? To be able to actually map and share TTPs based off sightings, so observations, not just we know they're capable of this, but hey, we're observing them doing this at this point in time in this geo as an example too. So
awesome. Ben, Jason, any additional questions for Derek while we have him?
Well, good to go from my side.
Yeah, I think that was a great overview. Thanks.
Derek, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thanks for having me. I'd just like to say there's good news ahead. Like I said, some work to be done, but we're making great strides. So I'm excited about the future.
Awesome. If you want to learn more about Fortinet or how to use actionable threat intelligence to stop attacks in your organization, please visit securityweekly.com/Fortinet. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.
It's time to rethink how we approach cybersecurity, because the reality is modern cyber attackers are already past your initial defenses. ExtraHop helps your security team find and eradicate advanced threats before real damage is done. Protect your enterprise and customers with better defense. Learn more about how ExtraHop stops advanced threats at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more. Cybercriminals are working overtime. Last year in the fourth quarter alone, phishing attacks disguised as COVID testing information increased by 521%. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Find out about the 13 email threat types and how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Ben Carr. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on your RSA Conference 2022 full conference pass. RSA Conference will be live in San Francisco June 6th to 9th. Security Weekly will be there in full force, delivering real-time live coverage and interviewing some of the event's top speakers and sponsors. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2022 and use the code 52UCyber. We hope to see you there. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review those suggestions often and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. All right, gentlemen, let's get into articles. Number one. Now, when I pull in leadership articles, I don't just focus on the CISO. I look at all leadership articles. And I thought this was an interesting one around successful CEOs navigate these three phases of leadership. And as I was reading these, I'm like, oh, yeah, I've been there. Oh, yeah, I know that.
Right. Absolutely, 100%. You know, and just to kind of kick this off, within the first couple of paragraphs, it was very telling. And I knew I was going to enjoy the article right away because it kicks off and it says something to the effect of, in my 20 plus years of experience from, a new hire to the CEO, I've never seen a company reach its potential and under anything less than exemplary leadership. That's telling, right?
Yes.
And one of the other telling terms is they say later on, usually the very last person to realize when leadership is starting to deteriorate is the leader themselves. So it just shows the need,
So
number
true.
one, right? The need for great leadership and to be focused on leadership when you are the head of a department or the head of a company, but also that level of introspection and the need to have people around you who you allow to have open, trustworthy conversations, right? Because that's where you start getting the intel, those, I'll call them, the lead measures for leadership, right? The intel, so you can pivot and not go down that path of being totally disconnected and not knowing when your leadership style is starting to fail.
Yeah. What I liked about these three phases, I've been almost in all of them. Not as much phase 3, I guess, at times, right? But you come in fresh, new, as the new leader for a group or whatever, and you're cautious a little bit, right? Because you haven't built credibility with the leadership team. Anything you do potentially kind of sticks to you in decisions, right? And so that creates a very interesting spot for a leader, right? And if you come in too fast and too hard, like right to phase 2, it creates a lot of friction in the organization early on. And I've seen it because I've kind of been in that role. Like, I wanted to shake things up. Like, sometimes when a new leader comes in, you want to shake some things up because what they've been doing is wrong, right? But you gotta balance that.
You do.
Because then when you transition into phase 2, where, okay, I've earned my stripes, I've got the trust, there's nothing I can do wrong, right? And that's when, things get a little interesting, because it can take you down number 3 very quick, which means, you've been there too long, you don't realize it's time to go. Yeah. Now, I typically identify my exit before I hit phase 3. I'm self-aware enough that I know when phase 2 is kind of at its end and it's time to move on, and I have in my career. I mean, you can look at my LinkedIn history. You'll know when I was at the end of phase 2, I pulled the parachute and went to the next one. So
it's a science though, Matt, because every leader goes through what I consider a confidence crisis, right? There are weeks that you go by and you're like, man, am I making an impact? And you really question yourself. But that's, you go through that. It's being able to balance and know the difference and know yourself well enough to know the difference between that temporary confidence crisis and hitting phase 3, right? That's the science. That's really knowing yourself.
A lot of this is the self-awareness issue, right? It's really understanding more about who you are and who the company is than, what your leadership style is, or how you integrate, or how you work well with people. I mean, you have to understand, like, if you're in the right spot, and if things have gotten to the point where you are in phase 3 and you've got to start, or you're coming up on it, you've got to move on, right? And I think the same thing for that phase 1. Like, I think it's knowing your personality type and knowing how to balance against, look, I want to start making changes, but it's not the right time yet. I have to give it some more time, right? I have to, at least give that perception that I'm gathering more information, even if the result is you still knew what the problems were and how to fix them early on. Sometimes it's about getting everybody else to buy into the fact that you spent the time to figure that out, and we're doing your due diligence as opposed to just making snap decisions.
Yeah. No, that's 100% dead on. It's you need that discovery phase to fully know current state and to bring your A game to the table later on. And the A game may just be, like you said, showing that you're doing your diligence and not making, snap decisions right away, even though you do know that they're the right decision to make, showing the team that you're taking your time and you're actually digging in to be confident in that decision.
Yeah. I always know whether I'm still providing value or not, because I know that if I'm not, it's time to go. If I can't make an impact anymore, it's time to move on. And then that's always the way I've kind of, figured out when it was time for me to transition to the new thing. And then, then you start it all over again. You go back through phase 1 and into phase 2. And, for most people, they'll go through that cycle multiple times, for sure.
Yeah. And to Ben's point earlier, it's about knowing you, right? It's because, one of the last statements is the root of the solution is to reestablish trust in yourself and your abilities, right? That kicks in your confidence, that encourages you to have that confident decision making, and it always gives you that level of gut check as to why you wanted to be a leader in the first place. So it's knowing yourself and being confident in yourself.
Yep. So the second article ties into this one a little bit for me, because this one talks about keeping sight of your company's strategy for the long haul. And they give a couple really good examples. They give the Adobe example, and it's a very similar example that I had at Tenable when I was there. When I went into Tenable to run strategy, I told the founders early on, I said, we've got to move to a subscription-based model. Perpetual with annual maintenance was not the route we needed to go. We needed to convert that revenue into subscription revenue, and I kind of pushed the organization through that, similar to the Adobe story here, because it created a recurring revenue model that you could predict revenue off of, especially as we're getting ready to go public. This is 2014, the IPO is 2017. It gave us time, and I warned them. I said it won't be pretty early on, but now's the time to take the hit while we're a private company before we go public, because once you're a public company and you try to make a change like this, like in Adobe's case, you take a hit for a couple of years. You take a revenue hit, people lose confidence in you, but long term, if you stuck with them, they're actually better off now than they were. But I wanted to get Tenable through that transition early on. So we planned this over a 3 to 4 year period that by the time we went public, we were in a much better way. And this is what this talks about, is how do you actually keep that kind of strategic vision in mind as you plan out and continue to move the organization forward, because yes, it can be painful in the first couple of years.
Yeah. And keeping your eye on the ball and steadfast on the execution is where most organizations fail. You can build a plan, you can build a wonderful plan. The hardest part is to execute against it. And I've always subscribed, and you guys have heard this before, to 4 disciplines of execution, right? Where those 4 disciplines are: focus on your important goals, act on those lead measures, make sure you're keeping score because you want to make sure you know you're winning the game. That's the whole lead measures mentality. And then make sure you're encouraging accountability across your organization to hit these goals, right? By having a cadence, by always looking to the strategy, because we run 1,000 miles an hour. We can let the run and the keep the lights on take over and never focus on that plan. The key is to focus on the plan. Put that focus time, guard the focus time, make sure you're doing it, doing the execution pieces.
And I would extend this to say, like, you have to have the vision, right? You have to have the goal that you're trying to get to. And I've seen a lot of companies and organizations falter in that they're not setting out an effective vision and they're not leading with a strategy that people can muster and align to. And so I think that goes down from the company to the org, to the individual level. Is you have to know where you're heading. So over that period of time, you can course correct and make sure, you are measuring those goals and targeting them. And if you get off track, you can get back pretty quickly, right? I've just seen organizations falter and stumble because nobody seems to know why they're going in the direction they're going. And so you've got people going in 6 different directions. And that lack of alignment and trust and vision can really be disruptive. And so the companies that I've seen that have done really, really well and been really successful, really focused goal, really focused orientation on results. And that just translates into people understanding what they need to do on a day-to-day basis to execute.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's aligning to the top. And if there aren't definitive corporate goals, business goals at the top, as a leader in the organization, start having that conversation to try to get some in place. Create some type of strategic committee within your organization, working with your CEO or your CFO, because that is the most important piece. Having your business units aligned to that higher level corporate goal or goals, right? And then having their business unit goals aligned to those. Now you can actually start showing how you're helping move the needle for the entirety of the organization. And
I would posit that it's not just, I think a lot of corporations get caught up, and Jason and Matt, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. Like their goals, everybody has OKRs or goals, right? But those goals can sometimes be like, sell more stuff. Like, right.
So that was where I was going, Ben. That's where I was going.
That's a revenue target, right?
The key to the goals are, number one, they need to be achievable. And secondly, they need to be measurable. And if you're not defining them to that level, you fail. Yeah. You fail.
And the only metric is not revenue. So we're going through this right now. Like Cyber Risk Alliance, like we know what we want to be. We want to be a data platform.
Yep.
But it takes time to build that model. And so, yes, you do iterative updates on certain product lines, like our account-based marketing, for example, right? We're going through iterations. We just made some changes to our Webcast and eSummit program. We're making iterative changes, all to keep us on track to get to that vision of being a data platform. But what you can't do is you can't let sales be the tail that wags the dog sometimes, because I look at the global kind of situation and numbers. I don't look at individual product lines on my side, right? So I'm not worried that I'm off revenue on this side. I look at the aggregate number, right? But sales can, and sometimes do, where they're like, oh wait, our webcast revenue's down. We got to go sell a bunch of one-off webcasts. Well, it doesn't keep you on track for the vision. It's just these little things get in the way that create bumps in the road. And from a vision perspective, you want them continuing to sell the integrated program, right? Like sell the vision. The rest will come, but we do tend to fall into these revenue traps.
Yeah. No, 100% agreed. And, that's why I think having visibility across the entire organization and having that transparency for all the business units so they can see how everyone collaboratively is moving the needle. That's why I said, in 40X, it's keep a scoreboard, right? Keep a scoreboard at the highest levels, keep a scoreboard at your business unit level. Now you know how you're helping move the needle, and over, moving the needle as a corporate entity as well. So it's having that level of transparency and keeping score. You need to know you're winning the game.
Right. Next article. Cybersecurity is IT's job, not the board's, right? It's a great little article. I loved it.
I hate the premise of even the title, though, Matt.
Yeah,
I know.
It's not even IT's job. Like, okay, let's assume it's not the board's job.
Right.
So the short answer is wrong.
Well, and it does talk about aspects of this in the article. Like, yes, as boards of directors, you can be held liable, right?
Absolutely.
And what I thought was interesting, though, is the 10 questions boards should ask to protect against cyber attacks. Like, if you are a board member, like, look at these questions. Like, take a look. What are the most important assets? Do you have cybersecurity expertise on the board? Like, there's some just basic fundamental things that I think board members need to educate themselves on to be prepared to ask the right questions at the board level. And, it does,
Matt,
it does lay it out.
Don't you think these questions, so the 10 questions the board should ask against cyber attacks, I thought these were well-intended, but they still got a little specific for a board. Like, what is our cybersecurity and data protection plan? The better question is, do we have a cybersecurity and data protection plan? And when did you last test it? And what were the results of the test? Like, that's a more board-oriented question than explain me the plan, because they're not going to get the plan.
That is true. I think it may be a little specific just because they wanted to make sure it was clear that, you should ask aspects about your plan and make sure you know what's going on. I know our board has asked some of these questions. That's because we also have a CISO that sits on our board, right?
Yeah.
So part of it is we do have security expertise sitting at the board, and so one of our board members, being a CISO, does ask some of these questions, right? And so you could, if you had the cybersecurity expertise on your board, but you're right. For most boards that don't have that expertise, some of these might be a little too deep.
Yeah. We're just trying to convey. We try to reinforce that all the time, conveying the right information to the executives and to the board. And I just think this article goes a little bit in the wrong direction. Although, as you said, I think well-intentioned, and their point of, making sure you know what type of program you have is super important. Do you have a program, right? How well is it run? That's ultimately, I think, what the board needs to get at.
Yeah, I feel the same way, Ben. These are very tactical questions. They need to be geared more to strategic. Because if I handed these to a board member, they'd say, I'm not going to ask that question. That's too tactical for me. That's too in the weeds.
Yep.
Yeah. Why some CISOs fail, Jason? Reporting structure?
Yeah, a little bit.
Do you understand the business? Do you know how to negotiate across the business units? Like, are you actually part of the executive team or not? Yeah. We've talked about this a lot, obviously, on the show.
100%, right? It's still the stigma of cybersecurity leader being a technology leader and not a business leader, right? A technology focused leader and not a risk manager, and that's why I've always said, start becoming a risk management professional, or you'll end up reporting to one as a CISO, right? We have to get in the mindset of aligning to the business, influencing the business, educating the business, learning the business. Now,
and look, I think from a CEO, like, one of the best things that someone could do, if you're a CEO and you're saying, look, I don't have the time or the knowledge, or I need this person. He's a really great CISO, but he doesn't have as much business acumen as I'd like. Who on your executive staff are you assigning as a mentor to that
mentor?
CISO?
You got it.
To bring them along, right? Like, make a partner with somebody else on the E-staff. And look, I'm going to tell you, that's transformationally going to change the way that CISO interacts with the rest of the team.
Agreed. Yeah, it's finding the right person with the attitude and aptitude to get to that level, and then building their leadership skills, building their business acumen, right, and getting them to that point. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, I did an advisory call this morning for a new startup, and it was interesting. We were talking about the CISO role and in kind of ownership and in cloud and in AppSec worlds and just the environment we're in. And he made this comment. He goes, yeah, like none of the CISOs now are technical. That's the CTO. All the CISOs, we're talking to now. This is primarily for financial institutions. He said they're all business people. They're not technical, and so you are seeing shifts in certain industries where this has been pretty adopted, but not in others yet because there's still that stigma of more the technician on the CISO side.
That's it. So now I say, whose job is it to educate these CEOs and board members to shift their mindset? And I think it's folks like us. We need to be out there. We need to be joining advisory boards. We need to be joining committees. We need to be doing things to get that level of communication and education to these CEOs and board members.
Yeah, for sure. JetBlue creates a culture of security. Great article on how JetBlue approached their Security Champions program. Just apply that to their flight status and cancellation policies, and they might be a little better off with their customers. A few complaints this weekend over a bunch of canceled flights. Yeah,
they need a customer success champions program.
Exactly.
Look, right. I love this. I love the article, right? Because I think like obviously JetBlue really committed 600 employees. That's a great commitment, I think, for a security champions program. But I've been doing this for years now, and I think it's really key to a successful program is to have a great security champions program embedded at all levels of the business. But one of the comments they make here is it can't just be like you expect them to go off and do stuff, right? You've got to engage. You've got to make sure they're getting, information back. They're engaged with the team. There's a draw for them being involved in security, not just a push for, hey, go roll this out to all your individual teams.
Yeah. It's giving them a mission, right? Educating them on the importance to what they're doing and to the entirety of the organization. They had put in there, and this is where you work with other business unit leaders because most of the time these security champions aren't reporting to you. So it's work with their leadership to say what potential career paths are in front of them that this could help with. And then the other piece was, I read the lessons learned, right? And high levels of communication, right? Always communicating back and forth. And then don't focus too much on just metrics and reporting, right? Don't focus too much. Still do it, but don't make it all about that.
I would tie this back to one of the earlier articles about vision, right? Like if you lay out the vision, then and give them the task of like what you're trying to achieve in the long run, and then treat this almost like a DEI initiative where you could say, I'm going to bring in somebody from marketing or somebody from baggage handling that has no concept of really security and say, like, this is the vision, what we're trying to do. I gather that you're going to get a lot more things that you weren't aware of and you would have never thought about for your security program. Even if it happens to be a physical thing, at least you could funnel that back to the right person and say, look, we weren't aware of this. This is a problem for the organization. We have visibility and we can address it. So get that different mode of thinking into your security organization outside of the normal track of people that you bring along for the ride.
Right. And Ben, and then what does that do? You're getting intelligence from around the organization that isn't necessarily always in your quote unquote wheelhouse, but now you're stepping up and you're getting that intel and you're becoming a corporate risk management leader, right? Because if you're getting physical security process issues, all of those issues that may be bubbling up and you're kind of controlling the conversation and the remediation, now you've aligned with the business and you're helping.
And when you bring that back to the E-staff and you say, hey, look, here's something that's not in my wheelhouse, but I think it's concerning for the business and I think we could impact revenue by doing X. Well, you're going to be looked at it in a much different way than just bringing, hey, we've got a certain number of vulnerabilities and we got to patch them this month.
Got it.
What I thought was interesting is that the two top risks they identified in this report is narcotics trafficking and baggage theft. Both decreased by implementing this program. When you say not in your wheelhouse, like
CISO's wheelhouse, right? Come on, that's in the CISO's wheelhouse.
We all handle narcotics. Right. Narcotics trafficking, number one requirement on the resume.
All day.
You've done requirements.
Right. And so the benefits, though, to the overall risk reduction for the airline goes up because of this program, because now people are more aware and they're more tuned into this kind of stuff. So there are other benefits than just a security benefit, back to the original point. But I just thought it was interesting. Security wasn't one of their top 2 risks, but yet they're seeing improvement there. Yeah.
Good call out.
Apply that to flight cancellations and you'll be all set. All right, our last article. How to get cybersecurity insurance and keep costs as low as possible. Yeah, right.
Good luck. Good luck.
Wait a minute. What?
Go back to 2010. That's how you get cyber insurance.
Yeah, right.
I mean, this is an Inc. article, by the way, right? And Inc. is putting this out there, and I'm like, do you not know what's going on with the cyber insurance market right now? Do you have no understanding of what's happening with these policies? And then you put out this article like, oh yeah, you just do these 3 steps and you're good.
Yeah. No, I mean, I read the article. I'm like, they don't know the disruption happening here. Like, there's so much disruption happening that, covering what you need to qualify, how to keep your insurance, and lowering your premiums. Because, that's easy.
Well, look, I mean, if you want to think about how the market's changed, right, from a cyber insurance standpoint, I believe it was Target finally settled with their insurer, and the insurer had to pay under their general liability policy. Now, that's because that's all been written out of general liability now, like years ago. But when that breach happened, it was still in their general liability policy. Things have changed so much, since that point. Like even if you have a specific cyber policy, there are a ton of exclusions now, right? And the value you're paying for that has just gone through the roof. So I just thought this was a little out of sync with the reality of where the cyber market is for insurance.
Yep. No, I agree. I had to pull it in here. We've covered this so much that I'm like, yeah, you're just kind of missing the point. Like, even if you do this stuff, you're still not going to get a policy. It's probably going to get canceled if you have one. Like, it's great steps, but what you're telling people is not realistic in the current environment we're in with ransomware. It's not.
Nope.
Yeah, and I think the market is ripe for somebody to come in and actually partnership with monitoring to be able to only ensure those assets that are adequately protected by monitoring that you can tell on a continuous basis. So you get compromised, you have ransomware, and that specific asset didn't happen to be under coverage at that specific point in time, coverage is going to get denied. That's the only way these people are going to be able to value these policies moving forward at the valuations that need to occur.
Yeah. I mean, insurance providers are going to start, and I'm starting to see the conversations in some organizations doing this, providing tools as part of their program.
Yep.
You get insured.
Well, AIG already
an
does it.
XDR, you get a net SIM SOC partner. You get EDR. You get all of these things with your insurance. You're getting tools.
Yeah, AIG was doing that a few years ago. They were actually, as part of their policy, there were certain products that they were providing as part of the coverage.
Yep.
You could see more of that, Jason. Like, you have to have these things implemented. Heck, you might see MSSPs partner with cyber insurance to create a managed offering with cyber bundled in it, because then you get the monitoring and the visibility back to the insurers to decide whether certain claims potentially would be covered or not. I mean, I could see that as kind of the next evolution.
And that just helps them reduce risk at that point because they're getting all the intel.
The model exists. We see that in the residential market, right? With auto insurance, where they're actually putting a monitor on your OBD2 port of your car. And if you drive, within certain criteria, you get a deduction on the rate of your policy. Like, I could certainly see that model being rolled out. And here's an AIG box to put in, and we want all the monitoring data back, right? To ascertain and make sure that we can actually cover your insurance.
Yeah. Crazy. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you, Jason, for holding down the fort last week. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.